In 1894, British soldiers marched through the streets of Hong Kong, dragging residents from their homes and burning their possessions in the street. A violent chain reaction brought this city into being: the collision of a global narco cartel, a tense imperial standoff, and a microscopic killer. For decades, the colonial narrative insisted that before the British arrived in 1841, the island was a barren rock, an empty, lawless coastline waiting for civilization to begin. But the historical record shows a thriving regional population. This map of the Pearl River estuary reveals a patchwork of Punti and Hakka villages farming the land, while Tanka and Hoklo maritime networks managed the surrounding waters. This complex maritime ecosystem provided the exact infrastructure and labor pool that made the region a prime target for foreign exploitation. In the early 19th century, the British Empire faced a silver crisis. They were spending massive sums on Chinese tea and silk, but the Qing dynasty had almost no demand for British manufactured goods. To force the trade balance back in their favor, British merchants like William Jardine turned to a lethal alternative: smuggling millions of pounds of Indian opium into China to create a captive market of addicts. The Qing authorities eventually retaliated. Commissioner Lin Zexu launched a massive crackdown, seizing illegal drug stocks and expelling foreign merchants from the mainland. Britain responded with the First Opium War. Using technologically superior ironclad steamships, the Royal Navy dismantled the Chinese coastal defenses and decimated their wooden fleet. The 1842 Treaty of Nanking codified the British victory, ceding Hong Kong Island to the British Empire in perpetuity. The illicit smuggling syndicates immediately transitioned into legitimate corporations. Firms like Jardine Matheson occupied the shoreline, building the massive warehouses and wharves that formed the harbor's first permanent commercial infrastructure. A narco-empire had used military force to legitimize its operations, turning a network of smuggling hubs into the physical foundation of a new British colony. The British occupation of Hong Kong Island triggered an immediate defensive response from the Qing dynasty, who needed a way to monitor the new barbarian presence. Many modern accounts describe the Kowloon Walled City as an ancient, lawless slum that slowly evolved over centuries. Documented evidence shows the opposite. The fort was built from scratch in a frantic 6-month window between November 1846 and May 1847. Officials chose this empty land specifically to stare directly at British settlements across the harbor. In its original form, this was a highly organized military installation, housing a large garrison and administrative offices behind thick defensive walls. The walled city stood as a physical manifestation of imperial defiance, built as a calculated countermeasure to the British threat on their doorstep. By the late 19th century, the colony's growth had produced a stark socio-economic divide. While wealthy British merchants built spacious estates on the hills, the thousands of Chinese laborers driving the harbor's economy were packed into tenement districts with almost no sanitation. During the summer of 1894, a severe dry spell hit. Without rain to wash the street refuse into the harbor, the city's rat and flea populations reached a breaking point. The Bubonic Plague arrived in the spring. Inside the cramped and unventilated tenements, the disease was catastrophic, killing over 90% of those it infected. British medical officers, still operating on the flawed miasma theory, believed the disease was caused by bad air and dirt rather than bacteria. This scientific ignorance led to brutal tactics. The Whitewash Brigade was sent to forcefully evict Chinese families, destroying their property and burning their personal belongings in the streets to cleanse the air. The colonial government's disregard for the Chinese community and their misunderstanding of basic biology escalated a medical crisis into a volatile social conflict. Resistance from the Chinese community was immediate. They rejected the military's tactics, instead seeking refuge and traditional care at local institutions like the Tung Wah Hospital. The stalemate was broken by a breakthrough in the lab. Alexandra Yersin arrived in Hong Kong in the midst of the outbreak and successfully identified the specific bacteria responsible for the plague. Armed with microbial evidence, the colonial government was forced to abandon its focus on miasma. To stop the disease, they were compelled to invest in Chinese infrastructure, mandating new housing standards for ventilation, drainage, and public sanitation. This forced a new era of cooperation. At the Tung Wah Hospital, the government began integrating Western scientific oversight with traditional Chinese medical practices. After decades of exploitation and military standoffs, it ultimately took a catastrophic, microscopic killer to force a deeply divided society to build the integrated, modernized urban infrastructure that forged the Hong Kong we know today.